Before we start our book, I think it's important to discuss the time period in which this is taking place. This is 1860, St. Petersburg, Russia. Russia having come through the war with Napoleon, having come through the Decembrist revolts in their country, and now in 1860, 1861, Tsar Alexander II has emancipated the serfs. So the serfs were not slaves, but they were peasants who had no ownership over the land that they were working. There were land barons, usually aristocrats, who owned very large pieces of land, who would parcel it off to peasants and poor people who would work the land for a price. They would give a portion of what they harvested or sold, or they would pay a rent to the land baron, and that was how they were able to keep the property in which they could then raise their family. It was never going to lead to freedom because they were never given the option to buy the land, and they could never afford to create any type of home situation off site of that. And so they were just kind of stuck generation after generation working this land for the land baron. Well, this is around the same time as the Civil War. So, this idea of freedom, of each man being equal, is going all around the world. And so, in the spirit of the times and in the spirit of raising the economic quality of life for everybody, Tsar Alexander II emancipates the serfs and gives them the option to be equal, but they would now not be renting the land anymore. They would not be the serfs or beholden to the land baron. But if they wanted to continue to work that land, which is the only thing that most of them had ever known, they would need to purchase the land, which was often much more money than it had cost them to rent, and they were barely surviving as renters. So this created not this economic freedom and revival that Tsar Alexander had hoped, but it had created this class of extreme poverty where these people were essentially pushed off the land many times, and now they are flooding into cities like St. Petersburg. So barely able to survive, begging in the streets, living in really abject type of situations, and with terrible landlords in the city. And at this point, all of Russia really is in an economic downfall. And we meet Raskolnikov. He is a student who has also been hit by the hard times and was in college but has left because he cannot continue to afford to pay for his classes. He has a mother and sister in the country. His mother is living on a limited income, a pension from his father that has died. His sister has taken up being a governess for a local aristocratic family in the country. And they are pinning all their hopes and dreams on Raskolnikov completing his university studies and becoming a lawyer, and thereby saving the family. This is their future hope. And he knows this. He knows that when his mother sends him money, that is not money that really she can afford. And so he is guilt-ridden by what is basically that he's now squandered through this money and that he's not taking classes anymore. He is going through a very depressed state. I mean, he is in depression. He is angry, and he feels, I don't want to say victimized, but he feels the injustice of it. And while he was in school, he had written a paper where he talks about the inequality and the injustice of the justice system, and questioning in particular why somebody like Napoleon, who killed and murdered hundreds of thousands of people in the wars that he perpetrated, why he was lauded as an emperor and a hero, and as a victor in many cases, when in another person's case, they would be tried and convicted of murder. And he questions who decides who gets to be a hero for their crimes and who goes to jail, and questioning the morality of that. And that was something at the time that these college students and this new wave of thinking was pushing back on the morals and questioning things, like as all college students usually do at all times in history, but particularly at that time, questioning morals, pushing back against religion, nihilism, thinking outside the box. And so when he wrote this, it wasn't really, it was just thought of, oh, this new idea. But now he's thinking about it in a real personal way, because there is a local pawnbroker who he has been bringing his last remaining items to in order to have money to survive. And he looks at her as this absolutely parasitic person within the neighborhood who is leeching off of these people who are in desperate times. And instead of giving them, you know, true value for what they are bringing to her, she's ripping them off and she's hoarding money. She's not living this lavish lifestyle. She's living in this equally depressing apartment in the city. She's doesn't have anything of really of value. She's just hoarding it. And he's noticing this and he's thinking, well, wouldn't I be a hero if I killed her and took the money and then really used it to help all these poor people who are coming to her for help, but she's not helping them? And I could help them. And what would make me be not a hero, but have that considered a crime? So he's really thinking about it in a personal situation now. And so that's where we find him in the beginning of the book, where he's leaving his flat and he's walking towards her house. And once again, he's going to pawn something, but he's not just doing it to pawn something. He's using this as a dry run. He's thinking in his mind the whole time, okay, these are the streets that I would walk. This is the time of day I would go, noticing who's around, kind of seeing like, could I get away with it? He hasn't totally decided that this is what he's going to do, but he's thinking about it. And sometimes when he's thinking about it, he's almost outside of himself, like looking at it as a third person, looking at himself and and not really sure that he would do something like that. There's times where he's, definitely in that mindset. And then there's other times where he's like, that's crazy. I'd never do that. And so he's also going through like a mental crisis. Like he's been depressed. He's not eating. He hasn't been paying his landlady. He's really in this nervous, agitated, anxious, angry state. He's going through all of these emotions. And so mentally, he's not in a good place. He's not in a good frame of mind. And so this is where we find him in the beginning of the book. And so we begin to figure out like the crimes, what are the punishments to those crimes, and will he commit a crime? Is there a punishment to the crime, and are the punishments what we think that they're going to be? And so it's a fascinating novel, and one that I'm excited to share with all of you. And I hope that you stay tuned. The next episode is chapter 1.